If you're struggling with anxiety, you may also be getting feelings of feeling absolutely exhausted, feeling extremely tired, feeling extremely lethargic. And you may be wondering, how does anxiety create these symptoms? Because you may have this idea that anxiety creates feelings of panic, feelings of high excitement, lots of energy. And here you're feeling the opposite. And things that you used to do very effortlessly seems like this huge monumental task. Well, in this video, I'm going to share with you exactly why anxiety creates this. And more importantly, by the end of the video, I'm going to share with you how to overcome these feelings once and for all. It was definitely something I struggled with, and once I understood a few things, I was able to overcome it. So let's get started. So when I was going through anxiety, I become agoraphobic, meaning I couldn't leave my house, right? I was getting very bad panic attacks. I was getting really intrusive thoughts about losing control, feeling like this was going to be me forever. I was getting extreme physical symptoms that kept convincing me that there was something wrong. And so what happened was that once I started focusing on recovery, I started going back to living as normally as I could. One of those things was going back to work. And what I started doing is I started working part-time. I didn't even work full-time because I didn't even have the confidence of being able to work full-time. And so what I started doing is I started working part-time. And I remember a 4-hour shift was absolutely exhausting for me. I was so tired. I was tired before that. And so I just felt like a 4-hour shift felt like climbing Mount Everest. And I always thought to myself, I'm like, how am I going to live the rest of my life like this? How am I going to overcome this? How am I going to work like this? Because it's just so exhausting. It's so tiring. Now, this is something that you may be going through too. And I want to share with you that it's very common for people struggling with anxiety. I have people all the time in the mentorship, almost daily experience this. And once we correct a few things, they go back to living. They go back to living fully, freely. So what is happening here? Well, see, what happens is when people are struggling with anxiety, a lot of times they spend a lot of time trying to figure out why they're experiencing these symptoms, right? And they've spent so much energy in the anxiety, right? Think about anxiety as being like this never-ending problem. What that does is that does tire the body out over time, and it does tire the mind out over time. What happens is anxiety sufferers don't often recognize how much energy they put into the anxiety. And so they don't really understand why why am I feeling so tired? Not recognizing that they've been struggling with this for weeks, months, years. And that takes a toll on the body. And so the important thing about that isn't to scare you or to make you feel guilty about it, but it's to put things in perspective that sometimes you're just feeling tired just because you've had this never-ending problem, and that's totally okay. Like, I had the exact same thing when I was struggling with anxiety. I struggled for so long that, I wasn't going to have the same energy levels that I was going to have in the past. Now, what happens is that when people are experiencing anxiety, well, it's the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response requires a lot of resources. It requires a lot of energy. So it's very draining on the body. So you may notice even when you're experiencing anxiety, you're naturally more tired because it's a lot more work. Have you ever had a panic attack and then feel absolutely exhausted from the panic attack? Panic attacks take a lot of energy, right? Now imagine if you're experiencing anxiety 24/7, how much energy is that depleting? So you may be wondering, okay, wait, Shaan, how do I stop that? How do I make this go away? Well, the important thing that I want to share about in this video, first and foremost, is that recognize that anxiety causes this. Normalizing what you're going through. Recognize that you're experiencing this because the fight or flight response is on for an extended period of time. And you feeling like you always need to do something about this is actually what's keeping it alive. And so if you really want to focus on overcoming this, focusing on the anxiety, I'm going to share with you in this video about how to do that. But if you want even more information, if you want more detailed information, I'll put a link down below to a book that I've written out, really breaking this down, really showing you graphs, success stories, really breaking down how recovery looks like and what to focus on. This way you can read this book multiple times too, right? You can really go into it, you can dive into it. And some of the things that I want to cover, I can't really do in a YouTube video sometimes just for the sake of time. So that book is free. The link is down below. It's something I wish I would have had during my journey. That's why I wrote it. So that hopefully it can help you out in your journey as well. So with that said, you have to understand feeling tired is a natural consequence of the anxiety. So what do you do? Well, I find a lot of people, what they try to do is they try to rest first. They try to rest and say, well, okay, well, let me rebuild my energy and then I'll go back out. Think about it as getting sick. You get sick, what does your boss tell you? Don't come to work. Don't do it. Just stay at home, get some rest, regain your energy, then come back, right? This could be with not just with that, but with exercise, with anything. You have this idea, this belief that once you're tired, you rest, come back. And that makes sense. And in those situations, 100%, you should be doing those things. However, with anxiety, I always find the solution is always counterintuitive. It's not actually regaining the energy. It's about going back to living. Okay? And so I remember when I was struggling with anxiety, when I started working those 4-hour shifts, I started moving from the 4-hour to the 8-hour. And there were times I was absolutely exhausted. And after an 8-hour shift, I was like, I don't know, I'm going to keep doing this. I'd go home, I'd rest, and then I'd go back at it again. And I would keep doing it. Now, what happened as a consequence? It wasn't that I became very, very, very tired over time. It actually was the opposite. My nervous system became more resilient over time. Now, this is assuming a couple of things. Again, this is assuming that you understand the mechanics of anxiety. You understand what's happening, right? You understand how panic attacks work. You understand how intrusive thoughts, the physical symptoms work. Again, that book is really going to be really a good start for you. After that, it's about learning how to respond to the anxiety. That in itself is a practice. And, we have a mentorship where we're guiding people through that journey. We're making sure that they're doing better and we're guiding them throughout that process because it is a process. It isn't like you do this once and that's it. You have to practice. It's almost like relearning how to almost walk to a certain degree. It can feel like that sometimes. And so learning how to respond to the anxiety, and then what it's about building your resiliency. And what I mean by that is going back to work. So I started going back to work 8 hours. Okay. I started slowly going back to 40 hours. And that in itself was amazing for me. I was like, I can't believe it. I can work like any normal person. For me, just the opportunity to be normal was so unbelievable. I was so grateful. I was like, if I could just live a normal life, that'd be awesome. That's all I want. I just want to live a normal life, And so what happened was I started going back to work. Then what happened on its own is that the energy levels came back on its own. So it's so interesting, right? Because here's the truth. If I had rested and never went to work and waited to feel better, I'd still be in the cycle right now. That's true. I would still be stuck in the cycle right now. But what happened was that I actually had to go back to living first. So the key is really go back to living with these symptoms there. Yeah. Now look, there's a fine balance here, right? Like this is one mode of looking at it, but always remember balance is key. You don't want to overdo this too, right? You don't want to work 60 hours, 80 hours, things that would make anybody tired and just be like, Shaan told me to go back to living, told me to go back to living. You have to recognize when it's too far too. Yeah. Don't use like these blanket statements, as you have to understand where you're coming from, right? And again, that's where the mentorship really comes in, where I find, because we can give specific feedback to certain people. Some people I find overdo it. They work too hard and I'm like, tone it back. Like you have to tone it back. And for the purpose of this video is for people that, aren't pushing themselves too far because they feel like they're fragile, they feel like they're broken, and they don't want to add extra stress. This video is more about, no, going back. And so you have to recognize where you're at. And if you're unsure where you're at, well, that's okay too. That's where I really find having someone who guides you through the process would really help. And so I hope this video helps. To wrap everything up, it's about going back to living with these symptoms there. Yeah, the resiliency comes back. But in order to do that, there's a few pieces that you have to have in mind. Number one, do you understand what's happening? Number two, do you know the solution? Number three, now it's about consistency. Now it's about going back to living. And so making sure those pieces are in place are very important. If you skip one of these steps, it can actually be more harmful. So like I said, don't really use these videos. These videos are more for roadmaps. Yeah, but the roadmap isn't the actual terrain. Everyone's a little bit different. So really focus and understand where you're at in the recovery journey. And what I would also challenge you to is if you really want to learn more, check out some other people's recovery stories. See how other people have recovered. See their biggest obstacles. See what was holding them back. What I find that what that does is that normalizes what you're going through. Because when you're struggling with anxiety, it's very easy to feel like you're the only person going through this. So I'll put a link down below to recovery stories. People that are recovered just like you. People that were in just as bad of a situation, maybe even worse, to be quite honest with you. And that's not to say that you're in a bad place or anything like that. It's just like, look, hope is a big part of recovery. Yeah. And sometimes normalizing what you're going through is important for the recovery journey, because if you feel like you're unique and if you feel like you're broken, if you feel like you can't handle certain things, it can turn into a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's a shame, because it doesn't have to be. We see people recover all the time. It's nothing unusual. And I've gone through it. I know exactly what's keeping you up at night. It's not a life sentence. Yeah. And it's just focusing on a few principles, staying consistent, being sharp on your mindset and your inner beliefs, moving on. And the symptoms go away on its own. And you can regain the energetic self that you were. Now 40 hours to me seems like a cakewalk. It's easy for me. I can do that in a heartbeat. I feel like now I overwork. I have my team. I have like people around me always saying, Shaan, you're working way too hard. Shaan, you're always working. You're always working. And this was the same Shaan who couldn't work 4 hours a day in a retail job. So it could just show you that what's possible. So anyways, I hope this video helps, and I'll see you in the next video.